Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Second Page Podcast. My name is Joseph Oswald. With me, as always, my esteemed producer and good friend, Mr. Stephen Johnson, across the table. How are you feeling today?
Tired and
Tired
lonely.
and lonely.
Yeah.
Well, you're not exactly alone anymore, as we all remember the midterms were last week, and there's just a little bit of hope that has survived the onslaught of 2016. So welcome, everybody. This is episode 46, The Power of Pink and Blue. The blue wave crested pink last Tuesday as women took office from both parties, likening the results to a similar year of the woman some 2 to 3 decades ago. Blue districts got bluer. Reds got redder, but purple bled across county lines and belts. While the Senate remains firmly in Republican hands without filibuster or supermajority rules to hold them back from pushing through judicial nominees and hardliner administrative appointments, the House is now firmly in Democratic hands. Hearings, subpoenas, investigations, all of this for the next 2 years, but at least redistricting is balanced. We're sorry, your Jeff Sessions has timed out. The embattled AG is
Not
out.
sorry.
Sorry, not sorry indeed, seemingly spelling the end for Mr. Jefferson, who was replaced by Matt Whittaker, circumventing the normal rules of succession and leaving an unelected, unconfirmed loyalist in the DOJ to do Trump's bidding until the Senate reconvenes. It is a scary time for journalists as the war on public media leaves social media largely unscathed. Remember the president saying that the media and the press are the enemies of the people? You don't see him say anything bad about Twitter or Facebook or any of those things, or even if it affects him, if he does.
Courtney's watching us. How are you,
Water,
sir?
Courtney. Mass shootings continue largely unabated, coinciding with increased vitriol and authoritative rhetoric, now so common that some victims have been re-victimized in separate shootings in separate places.
Final destination.
Tell me about it.
Not
That's why we
really a
don't travel
joke,
behind trucks with
but
large barrels of wood. Troops bored at the border, waiting for the caravan that may never come. The answer? Send in more troops. 15,000 more supposedly to be deployed to protect against an unarmed caravan of migrants seeking legal protection who are, in fact, half the size of the deployment.
Are we still talking about the caravan, like after the election?
You know what's really surprising? That there are so many people all of a sudden don't want to care about it anymore. But there's so much to talk about and so much more to discuss. So join this conversation live, comment, call in, like us, share with us, subscribe to Facebook and YouTube. Tell all of your friends to watch now because they'll see what you get to say and be a part of the conversation with us. So, Steve, how did you feel about the midterms?
I mean, so let's be clear.
Did you see it coming? That's what I want to know. Did you see everything that happened happen? Did you was it foreseen?
Yes. Like it played out. This is the thing everybody needed to understand about those midterms. Like
So, Steve,
everyone knew how the whole thing was going to play out because they told you already. The Democrats were going to take the House, the Republicans were going to keep the Senate because the Republicans had more seats that they to
is that like Shakespeare telling us how Romeo and Juliet's going to end right in the beginning?
Hang on. Yeah, maybe, but listen, here's the thing. The Republicans had less seats up for grabs in the Senate, but much more in the House. That's it. So the Democrats were on defense in the Senate and offense in the House. Anything other than that was just the news media trying to hype it up so they could get everybody to watch. Everyone knew how it was going to play out. Now, I will say you did have a record turnout. I thought that record turnout meant it was it was a blue wave. Let's be clear about that. This is the largest Democrat victory since Nixon. Wow. Right? So 40 years the Democrats haven't done this well in the midterms. That said, you still had O'Rourke still lost, right?
Unfortunately.
Gillum,
but he was proud of us.
Is doing a recount now, even though he conceded the night before, which I have to question that man's judgment because you see Stacey Abrams was out there. She was like, "I'm not leaving." She turned into Leonardo DiCaprio in Wolf of Wall Street. I ain't fucking leaving.
Yeah, yeah, that's Stacey right there. I guess.
So, but whoever told Andrew Gillum that there's no way they could make up the votes, they need to be fired. Although, if he loses, everybody's fired because
Yes.
nobody will have a job.
Well, somebody will find a job somewhere. There's pay to
Now,
play works in
I
every
saw
state.
some poll today that said Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and Beto O'Rourke are like the front runners for who people want to run in 2020. And I just thought to myself, those are all white dudes who lost. That is how failing upwards works.
Yeah, that's funny actually. Well, you never know. Listen, if it goes like that, I mean, maybe Gillum could find himself appointed to some position within the White House. But I did get a little bit of a flutter of excitement when I saw a serious suggestion of Biden O'Rourke. You know, if you just think, you know, Joseph Biden and Robert Francis O'Rourke, I mean, they just sound like two people, clearly white men, liberals, but nonetheless, that would actually hold their own on a ticket against Donald Trump in 2020.
Now, I don't know that that's true, but now you sound like Michael Avenatti, who says that you need
Which
to
I had his
run
money.
a white man and it's not fair, but that's all the country's going to listen to.
Well, if you know that there's only one possible
He
outcome
was
for
also
something,
vying for himself to be the candidate.
yeah,
but
but like that was never gonna happen. That was just like when Newt Gingrich said he was running for president. He was just doing it so he could be cheerleader for the Republican
I
Party.
thought he
Never
was doing
actually
it so he
thought-
could build a moon base.
Well, he's still probably trying to build that moon base. But
I want the moon base.
I want the moon base too. I mean, I never ever cared for Newt Gingrich. He's one of the
2001: A
worst
Space
things
Odyssey.
that's ever happened to America.
How is the monolith going to come if we don't got
But
the moon base?
we need at least a moon base. I mean, we're probably the only creatures in the whole universe without a moon base. Why can't we have a moon base too?
I want a moon base.
I don't know. I
Maybe
was thinking
some
about
dark
joining
side of the
Space
moon.
Force.
Courtney, it was also disappointed in Georgia
Yeah.
and Florida.
Well,
And look,
okay, so
even with the recount, like the biggest recount change or controversy was by 500 votes. Gillum is down by 33,000 votes. But they're saying the closer one is Bill Nelson.
Well, the Nelson Senate race, he's the incumbent Democrat senator from Florida, and I believe that it was, to use a George Bush word, it was a good bit of strategery, because I think that they very much feared what they saw happened with the Roy Moore, Doug Jones situation, did not want that to happen in Florida, because obviously Rick Scott, I'm not sure if Florida's term limits their governors. In any case,
Wait, hang on. Courtney, who did you think ran for book sales? Go ahead.
Oh, as soon as they realized that, you know, Rick Scott wanted to stay in politics, and after the Parkland shootings, like he, you know, very quickly moved for the bump stock bans, and, you know, all three branches of the government controlled by the Republicans, they were able to get that through pretty easily. But he ran for Senate in order to take the seat from Bill Nelson, who was very popular in Florida. If you look at Georgia, at Florida, at some of these other really close races where Republicans should have had a huge advantage, almost all of these races are down to 50-50s where there's a half a point difference, and they're automatic recounts triggered by state law. Funny note on that one, Scott Walker, after Donald Trump won in Wisconsin by 1 point, passed a law through the legislature, forced it down, that said that any candidate who does not win by 1%.
Can we stop for a second and just acknowledge that Scott Walker lost?
I know, I'll just revel in that for 2 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Please continue.
so Scott Walker signed a law that says if you're not within 1%, you do not have any right to a recount, and he lost by 1.25%. So his own law came back to bite him in the ass. Kind of like sounds like a Sith Lord, right? But this was also him going on to his third term, and he got beat by the superintendent of the public schools, the Democrat. The person in Kentucky, the county clerk, Kim Davis, who had made herself famous by refusing to give a marriage certificate to a same-sex couple, was defeated by the same person she denied a marriage certificate to. Colorado has elected its first gay governor and has now become the first openly gay governor in the history of the United States, because, you know, some people may remember that New Jersey had a gay governor, but he was not open about it, and he got in a lot of trouble for keeping it on the low, and his wife was pretty pissed off when she found out.
Well, as she should be.
As well she should be, of course. But we're talking, we now have 2 Muslim women elected from the middle of the country. We're not talking about from California
One
and New
that
York.
wears a hijab.
Yes.
That's a big deal.
And can you imagine Mike Pence's face, you know, if he were to have to swear someone in with a Quran instead of a Bible? I mean, they would just, his head would explode. We have
that was all part of the plan.
Right. That's the assassination attempt. They'll say it too. We have a Native American woman that defeated an incumbent Republican, I believe a 4-term incumbent Republican, who was also openly LGBT, and former either MMA fighter or trainer, and now she is a congresswoman. We have Connecticut and Massachusetts have both sent their first black woman to Congress in the entire history of this country. We've got a...
You mean in those states?
In those states, yeah,
okay.
for them, because they've sent... Well, black men have obviously gone, and there are obviously black women in Congress too.
I was about to say, don't disrespect Auntie Maxine.
When I opened up this episode, I had mentioned that the blue wave had crested pink, and I meant that because there are now over 100 women in Congress. Obviously, like Claire McCaskill and Heidi Heitkamp lost their Senate seats, but there are now over 100 women in Congress. To give you a little bit of perspective, because sometimes people like these numbers, 1/3 of the Democratic Party, 1/3 of the entire Congressional Democratic Party is a white male. 90% of the entire Republican Party in Congress are white men.
Well, I mean,
that means that 1/3 of the Democratic Party represents white men, and the other 2/3 are African American, are Native American, are Muslim, are Latino. I mean, we've got 2 Latinas that were elected out of Texas and I think Utah. Michigan legalized marijuana for recreational use.
Alexandria
Ocasio-Cortez, youngest woman to ever sit in Congress, and she is a Latina and an avowed socialist. We were talking about the legalization of marijuana, the expansion of Medicaid in Idaho, Utah, Missouri, these red states.
1.4 million ex-convicts in Florida.
1.5 million ex-convicts in Florida, and you better believe that. And I'm not. And I hope nobody.
0.5.
I hope nobody takes this out of context, but it is very likely for anybody who watches elections, knows politics, to say that if those men and women who had their right to vote obviously arbitrarily and illegally disenfranchised them, if they had the right to vote, it's very likely that Bill Nelson, Andrew Gillum easily would have won in Florida, because 70% of these
register them, and you have to.
I'm just saying, if this had happened before, if they had never been disenfranchised in the first place, you're talking about 20% of the black population of Florida now can vote. 40% from black men.
Are you saying that 20%
of the voting eligible population is now eligible to vote?
No. But is that because 20% of the voting eligible black male population was in jail in Florida?
No, it means they were convicted of a felony, and it doesn't even have to be in Florida. So they could have moved to Florida from another state.
So 20% of the black males in Florida
were eligible to vote.
Fantastic. But what I'm asking you is if 20% of the black males in Florida were at some point convicted of a felony. That's what you're saying. I
am saying that, and you have to remember too that this is not. It does not apply to people who were convicted of violent crimes and things like that. It's only non-violent drug offenses, some certain domestic offenses and things like that. And again, this 1.5 million people, obviously that's not 1.5 million black people. It's 1.5 million people who are convicted of felonies will now be allowed to vote, because the felonies they were convicted of were not violent in nature, and they should not have been disenfranchised in the first place.
Right.
So of that 1.5 million, you're talking maybe 1 million of them are probably African American, which represents roughly 20% of the voting eligible population of the African American community in Florida, which will now also be able to cast ballots in the 2020 election for
what
president.
About parking tickets? I'm not sure.
Parking tickets are misdemeanors, and you can't lose your voting right over that. You can only lose your voting right over a felony, which means a crime that has more than, I think, $1,500 worth of damage and was committed on state property or federal property. So if you're convicted in the state of Florida of a federal crime, you're a felon. If you're convicted in the state of Florida of a state crime, you're a felon.
Tell that to the guy that ran against Stacey Abrams.
Yeah, well, you're talking about, this upward losing, with these 3 losing white guys being on the ticket, and you're talking about someone in Georgia, Brian Kemp.
Anthony Franco, what's up?
What's up? That's my brother. He's one of my grooms from my wedding. I love that guy. The thing with Brian Kemp is that he was the Secretary of State, so he's overseeing the election that he's running in. He basically threw away almost 500,000 votes, and he's losing by such a small percentage that it's so easy for anybody to say that even 10% of those votes that were thrown away.
You mean he's winning by?
Yes. So even if 10%,
I'm sorry, he's cheating by.
Yes. So if even 10% of the ballots that were thrown away because of something stupid like the signature didn't look like it matched or the birth date was
Yeah,
off.
but here's the problem with the signature not matching. That's up to someone's discretion.
Exactly. That's why it was abused, and that's why the judge is ordering those ballots to be counted again. Same thing in Florida. They're using the
There's
same
still
things in
not
Broward
enough to
County.
make up for her to win, though.
You may say that.
And what's the tragedy of all this is that even for it to be this close, the amount of work that Stacey Abrams had to put into to work against someone that is actively cheating,
and who has control
closing
of the
poll
election.
Locations, like turning off
and think about that.
boxes.
Even with all of that, he's still barely winning by the slimmest of margins. And
so
I mean that is
crazy.
that is the
if
Republican
it was a
policy
fair
for,
fight, and meanwhile they're talking about fraud in elections. Like, how is this?
Okay, so on top of everything else that was succeeded, 7 governors' mansions flipped, and we're talking the most important thing
to
23. We took over 30 House seats, even though it's half of what the Republicans took when Obama was president.
But whatever.
Yeah, but we're still talking.
But that's like even in the country out.
Yeah, 1/3 of the losses suffered over the Obama years to Republicans have been recovered overnight. We're talking. I mean, we now have a majority of state attorney generals, 27, 23. So we're talking to people that can sue the federal. Letitia James. We got Tish James taken up in New York. Finally, the New York Senate is
first black
Democrat.
AG.
Yeah, first black AG female.
Well, not black female AG.
Yeah. And now that the Senate is out of Republican hands and the Democrats, the Independent Caucus of Democrats, I think ICD, I think they're called, has finally stood down and Cuomo has declared the Democratic Civil War over. We're talking all these rules on voter registration.
Is the Democratic Civil War over with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez picketing outside Nancy Pelosi's office today?
Listen, things will get shaken up, and
while was that just a stunt?
I fully support. It probably was. I mean, she's got plenty of marketing people behind her too. She knows what she's doing. You know, she didn't win that election just because she had a pretty face. You know, she won that election because she worked hard. She knocked on doors. She spoke Spanish to people who felt ignored the whole time. I mean, Donald Trump talks about all these ignored white people. What about all the ignored people in the brown community, the black community, the Muslim communities?
I would like to have a discussion about something, if we could, if you would allow me, sir.
Proceed.
Now, and this is a serious question. Will Democrats win the immigration debate? And I'm going to tell you why. Right? You would think with all this hostile rhetoric towards immigration and like taking kids away from their parents, turning people around at the border that are looking for asylum, sending troops, threatening to shoot them. And you'd think that in places like, I don't know, Florida, the vote wouldn't be 50-50 for Latinos that are voting for a Republican that embraced Trump's policies, right? You think in Atlanta it wasn't, 30-something to 65. You know what I mean? Like, and I say that to say, let's say in Florida, right? It was like 97. Gillum got 97% of the black female vote, and like, oh no, it was flipped around. Sorry, it was like 90-something% of the black male vote and then high 80s on the black female vote. But it was 50-50 for Latin people that voted Democrat and Republican. So, and I saw an article that came out this week that says more Latin people identify as white or are identifying as white. So my question to you is, when you have large numbers of Latin people that are voting Republican, despite these the immigration stances that they take, is this a losing battle for the Democrats?
Well, that's a lot to unpack, and it's a really thorough and well thought out question. I think first of all, if you want to go, we're started from the end of what you said and work my way back forward. The identification issue, I think that's incredibly important for someone, especially in this time when people are being able to identify as whatever they feel that they are, and sometimes that can be taken too far, or can be considered non-PC. But if you think about it from that actual perspective of most of these Latinos, these people who immigrated to the United States or are first generation and their parents speak Spanish and maybe very little English, and they've helped them through everything and they've grown up here, but their parents were not. Most of these people that came from South America or came from the Caribbean or came from Latin America to the United States identify as white because in their home countries they are white, because the difference between being white and not is whether or not your ancestry lies in Europe or the indigenous populations. So if you were to take an example from Jay, which he's brought up on the show, so don't feel bad about bringing up a personal issue, but his parents immigrated from South and Latin America, and in their countries, especially because of their fair skin and the color of their eyes, they were considered white. They were first class. They were that type of person as they would be in America. But coming to America, because they spoke Spanish, because they had an olive tint to their skin, and mostly because of the way that they sounded when they talked, they immediately, because they're in America, become second class citizens to that respect, where they're not looked at the same way as they were societally and from the hierarchy of social structure. So I can see why they would want so badly to identify as white and to say that they're doing that, and that's why they're voting in a certain way. I would hope that that's not the case, but then you also look to pivot to Texas and you see how many Latinos voted for Ted Cruz and how many women voted for Beto O'Rourke, and these things that you would think would have been one other way but weren't. So sometimes people are also voting with their pocketbook. Some people vote that way. Will the Democrats be able to coalesce? I think the most important thing to take away from this election is one of the first times you've had an election in a midterm where the main issue wasn't about the economy, because for all intents and purposes the economy was doing well, and for any party in power that should have been what they were talking about. Trump wanted to make it all about him, and thus everybody below him tried to make it about him and his policies, which first and foremost are race and gender based issues. With the amount of women and the amount of minorities that just got elected, not just to federal offices, but we're talking councils all over the world, all those special elections that we covered throughout the year, where Democrats kept taking seats, transgender, black, women, Muslims, young people, Native Americans, all these people taking seats from the old way things were done. And one of the most important things to realize is that 50 to 70% of Democratic challengers who were challenging incumbent Republicans refused to take super PAC money and made a point of that. The Democrats relentlessly focused on local issues. Every House Democrat, every Senate Democrat, everyone who was trying to take a seat from a Republican looked at that seat and said, what does this seat hover over? And they went after those issues. If you were in New Jersey, New York, all they were talking about was how bad that tax bill was. They didn't care about the border and immigration. But then you go down to Tennessee, you go down to Missouri, you go to Georgia, you go to all those places where Trump's message really resonates, and you have to talk about those. But you get your Beto O'Rourke who say, I'm not going to give up my gun. I'm going to be a real Texan. I'm going to do all this, but still follow the mantra of go local, focus locally. And that's what the Red Maps project was for the past 10 years for the Republicans. They started at the bottom, they worked their way up until they got governor's mansions, until they flipped all the majorities over, and they ended with the federal government. I believe the Democrats do have a chance, but just like you were seemed like you were trying to allude to, they need to coalesce around a strong candidate, whether it's Joe Biden and Beto O'Rourke or Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders or whatever it's going to be. If they don't coalesce around a strong force, then Donald Trump will walk over them despite all of his faults.
Can the Democrats run and not without a woman on the ticket?
I mean, that's difficult to say, especially because of what we've seen
in the climate that we are in now.
I think that you can if you put up a Democrat who has a long track record of being empathetic towards women's issues.
Do you think that if they do not run a woman candidate, and we want to say whoever's the best candidate should win, but if that was the case, Hillary would have won. But if they don't run a woman on the candidate on the ticket, whether it's in the leading position or the vice position, will people just stay home?
No, I think that there's enough fire. I think they're enough fired up.
Would it look tone deaf, and would certain people stay home?
I think there are, but I think there will be so many more women on the ballot, though, that you can't just say because a woman isn't on the ballot for president that you wouldn't do it. I think that women are far more patient than men when it comes to certain things, and I know that's a little bit.
Speaking of being patient, one of Hillary's top aides or ex-top aides says she's definitely planning to run again. the rematch of the century.
It kind of, I mean, yeah. I mean, I guess it would be.
I mean, the century is still young.
I mean, that would probably be the ultimate like satisfaction to see her beat him.
No, don't. She can't. I listen.
Only because he would probably He would probably commit suicide.
I know, but at the same time, she can't run.
No, probably. I don't think she should. I don't think she should. I think there are plenty more women who deserve to be in power and who deserve to lead the country into the future. I think, honestly, let's stop electing 60 and 70 and 80-year-olds to lead this country into the future. If you want to lead the country into the future, you need to lead people who are going to live in the future.
I think you
just
going to
be alive when the future comes.
I think you need to elect competent people.
I think you need to elect people who understand that the consequence of the decisions 20 and 30 years down the road will affect them. If you know that you're going to be dead in 20 or 30 years, what do you care how many coal plants there are? Donald Trump is 70
maybe
years
because
old.
you have empathy. Maybe you shouldn't elect old Republicans.
I mean,
right?
yeah. I mean, honestly, but because then that goes right to the issue of Nancy Pelosi, who is also an older woman. I think she's 76 years old. Very accomplished. Has raised almost $1 billion for Democrats over her career, and knows what she's doing. She was vilified in every commercial against Democrats, no matter where they were in the country, left, right, up, or down.
First of all, she was vilified by some Democrats
because she's powerful and she knows how to get things done.
But this is the thing I don't understand. Everybody's on the get Nancy Pelosi train. Like why? Because she's effective, right? Because your enemy hates and is scared of her.
You don't want your enemy, of course, would not want you to have the strongest
You're letting
generals
them
out.
dictate what you want. They run a propaganda campaign against her like they ran against Hillary, except Nancy Pelosi doesn't have as spotty a record as Hillary had.
What I'm saying is going to happen.
Why would you get rid of one of your most effective tools in the shed?
I don't think that they're going to get rid of her. I think that they're going to give enough of the Democrats who are in weak positions to face challengers, allow them to vote against her. But
you don't get ACA without Nancy Pelosi.
That's true. Listen, honestly, it's the only check we have on the administration. There's a lot of stuff that won't happen because the Senate just won't hear it. I mean, you saw the gridlock that happened in Albany. Just take that as a macrocosm or a microcosm of what the United States Congress would be.
Here's something that was not probably on your list. Bernie Sanders had a fail this week. He did an interview with I can't remember who, but it was a postmortem on the midterms. And he says they asked him about Stacey Abrams and Andrew Gillum. And this was his quote. I think there were a lot of white people that weren't necessarily racist, but they just didn't feel comfortable voting for a black person. But that's changing. Now, here's the problem. And this is how a lot of these things continue, right? When you don't acknowledge, like, that's what racism is, right? Like, you could be well-meaning, and there are a lot of well-meaning racists, right? And some people's racism is more harmful than others. But things like that is how these things continue because we are so reticent to label a thing what it is. Now, if I say, you know what, I can't vote for you because you're gay, what does that make me?
Is that rhetorical?
Oh, I'm not, unless you have something to tell me, which is fine. I don't think Gina would like that, but.
No, I'm saying if you're saying you.
My point
Obviously,
is,
I get that somebody would say that someone like that was a homophobe, but I think that it's easy to take what he said out of context because I think what he was just speaking truth to something that just it is. That there are plenty of people out there, well-meaning, who would never harm or own a slave or harm a black person because of it, but just like they just don't want to see somebody that doesn't look like them in charge.
But this is the problem. That's how it happens, though. So that's a small thing, but you can extrapolate that, right? Feeling uncomfortable around people who don't look like you. Okay, here it's a vote, but for a cop in a life and death situation, it's whether I kill this person or not, right? It's all of that plays into it. So when we can say that this person is not racist, but they don't want to see you in power, what does that mean? Because, and I say all of that to say
women have been going through the same thing.
We go out of our way so much to say that unless somebody is a self-ascribed neo-Nazi, then they
Arthur
can't be
Jones.
a racist, right? And that's the problem. A lot of these things are just like W.E.B. Du Bois talked about this with the death of 1,000 cuts, right? It's all these little things that like you take it on its face and it's nothing, but when it all adds up, these are the things that you have to deal with. And so if he just said there are some people that they meant well, but they, you know what I mean, but they didn't feel comfortable voting for a black person, leave it there. Adding the but they're not necessarily racist. There's acute racism and there's blatant I'll kill you racism. But it's all fruit of the same poisonous tree. And we have to call it what it is, because if we just say shit like that is okay, then it continues.
Well, again, I don't think he was saying that it was okay either. I think he was just talking about that there are millions of Americans who voted this past election who probably were either the types that would pat themselves on the back because they voted for a colored person, they'd say, and be like, "Ooh, look at me! I voted for a black." Like, But there are also some people who are just like, I don't see a major difference between the two of them, so why not go with the one that looks like me? And I think that Bernie Sanders was talking about that. Obviously, I don't speak for him, but you're talking about a guy who's pushing 80, who's been in politics forever and is registered as an independent forever, and possibly lean social democrat.
He's saying people wonder why he didn't do very well in the black community. That's all I'm saying. But again, my point is
that's difficult to do.
We have to call. And again, this is not like, oh, Bernie Sanders is like terrible or whatever, but you have to call this shit out for what it is.
I agree.
And if that is factoring into your voting decision, where you're not looking at the policies, you're just like, well, I don't really feel comfortable because, they're black. You're making a decision based on race, and that's saying we're not equal, and that is by definition racism. Again, whether it's acute or blatant, that's still what it is, and we have to say that, because I don't think we can progress unless we say that and call these things out. It's okay to say that, somebody that gets, extra looks in a store, like that shit was racism. It might not be something that's gonna like end your life, but it's still there. You know what I mean?
Well, I think one of the things we definitely can draw from this recent election is that some of the most adamant anti-immigrant and vociferous racist people lost their election bids. Arthur Jones obviously lost his bid in Illinois. Chris Kobach lost his governorship of Kansas. I mean, he was supposed to head Trump's voter fraud thing. Leonard Lance lost his seat in New Jersey. Leonard Lance is one of the most ardent racists and hardcore conservatives.
The body slam guy lost too, right?
No, he won. He won because because 2/3 of Montana voters
body slammed his way into
absentee ballots, because polling places are forever away. You get one congressman in the entire state of Montana.
Steve King won.
Good for him. And then Kim Davis lost, and Scott Walker losing. So those were some great things. But when talking about
didn't give Trump any love.
When talking about the things that people say and how they can affect them, just to kind of move to a different direction here, one of the things I just wanted to bring up, and it was just one line, and it's sticking because it's really making its way and it's costing lives. And it was a quote by a Nigerian general. They put down political protests violently this past week, firing live ammunition to crowds of people that were blocking streets, which that's happened here in America recently. That's how people have been protesting. And we got all up in arms when people said, we should just allow them to get run over. They're blocking a street, whatever. But then these Nigerian generals, the ones that are in charge in this country, which is the most populous country in Africa, are saying that because Donald Trump said that rocks were the same as guns when referencing these migrants approaching the border. If they throw rocks, we'll respond with rifle fire.
To be fair, do you think that they would not have fired on the crowd whether Trump said that or not? That's an excuse.
But it's we don't need to be the ones that they're quoting. Let them quote someone else. But they are now quoting America, who spent decades in Africa saying, we're trying to get you guys up from colonialism. Just give us some gold and some ore and some oil and some uranium, and you'll be cool.
Right.
But now we're exactly. But now these countries around the Philippines, Myanmar, places in the Middle East are all using the things that Donald Trump says as reasons for why they can suppress the free press, for why
excuses.
Excuses. I'm sorry, you're right. excuses for why they can fire live ammunition to crowds of people peacefully protesting. And they are quoting our president now for committing genocide, for committing racially motivated crimes and politically and religiously motivated murders. These are things that are going to continue to happen if someone like Donald Trump gets to keep saying everything he wants. Again, I have to circle back and say, which is why it was such a good thing to have gotten the House, which is all anybody wanted.
Well, we'll see what they do.
That's true, but now he's fired Jeff Sessions the day after the midterms because we all knew that the reason we didn't do it before was because it would have affected Republican turnout. And Jeff Sessions had already offered his resignation twice. Trump has been foaming at the mouth to get rid of him. And now the forerunners for the replacement, he's thinking Matt Whittaker, who was under Rod Rosenstein. Rod Rosenstein should be the acting attorney general because he was
Matt Whittaker was installed as a spy.
He was installed as a spy. I'm sure of that. Rod Rosenstein was confirmed by the Senate, though, as the deputy AG.
Is it Steen or Stein?
Rosenstein, yeah. In any case, he should be in line, but the only way to fire Rod is to have somebody that's above him. So that's why you make Matt Whittaker, who once said, okay, we don't have to exactly fire Mueller. We just take away his entire budget to make it so that they can't do anything.
Here's the thing, though. At this stage, they actually don't need to fire Rosenstein, right? Because the only reason Rosenstein was in charge was because Jeff Sessions recused himself. If Jeff Sessions is no longer there and Matt Whittaker has not recused himself, that means Mueller reports directly to him.
Technically, yes. Yes, but I mean, I think some people would rather him go indirect and go through Rosenstein.
Really?
Rosenstein, yeah. But I mean, we're talking about this just ultimate conflict of interest and just a complete abuse of normal rules of succession and order. I mean, I can imagine Don Jr. probably looking at him and was like, are you really cool with skipping over the guy who's supposed to be next in line? Because you're about to die.
No,
and I kind of want all your money.
You can't imagine Don Jr. saying that because he's not that bright.
I don't think he has that kind of vocabulary.
Now, I'm sorry. Like, I get, I guess we should be worried that he got rid of Jeff Sessions, but Jeff Sessions wasn't the worst.
He was literally one of the worst attorney generals the country's ever had.
So, you know.
I mean, even yesterday, the entire policy of this tough on crime and drugs and stuff like that, these wars on things, these inanimate things that they cannot be won. That's just rebuked. I mean, we're talking about 3 red belt states that passed marijuana legislation and Medicaid expansion.
So Courtney just asked, without the Senate, what can the Dems actually do?
They can do a lot.
What?
They have full powers of subpoena, full powers of investigation.
Here's the problem with having the power of subpoena. Do you not put it past Trump people to just say no?
They can't necessarily say no, because the point of having a subpoena power, it's not just, we have the authority to write a subpoena. It's we have the authority to arrest you without trial if you refuse the subpoena. I mean, that's why the House Un-American Activities Committee back in the McCarthy era, that's why those things were so, blacklisting was so scary, because that's all they had to do was the House dragged you in front and just a simple majority of the people in the committee, and the committees are chosen by the party in power so that every committee has enough of a majority of that party that no committee can be taken over by the minority. That's why you always have 10 and 11 right. Republicans, 10 Democrats, if it's a tight thing. We've taken 30 plus seats. There's some committees that are going to have a couple more Democrats than not, but you have to spread out your party along every committee. So if you form a committee to investigate Trump, you will probably have to put some Republicans on it. It's going to be impossible to have a fully Democratic committee. So there will be a couple back and forths, but the majority rules and the chairman.
And the point is, they're talking about going after his taxes. A lot of people are being easy on the impeachment stuff. It doesn't matter. But my point is, the Democrats, they say they don't want to overplay their hand. And the Democrats, as a rule, like a general rule, this is not a hard fact, but a general rule, are pussies. So will they actually go after some of these things, like the tax return?
I think you're just so used to seeing Chuck Schumer leading the voice of the Democrats, because he is seemingly weak, but he's obviously not, because he's gotten to where he is for a reason. But
I'm interested to see what Auntie Maxine is going to do.
Maxine, the people that were directly accosted by Donald Trump will be the first ones that they're going to say, oh, they're doing it all for politics and blah, 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 because now Republicans are in the minority. They can go after the guys in charge. I still think that what we're going to find are subpoenas to protect the Mueller probe. Like, they're going to force the documents to be preserved, even if Mueller is fired or the investigation is stopped. They're going to get Trump's tax return, which the Congress is empowered to do. And even if he refuses, then all they have to do is say that the chairman of the committee is going to look at it in private.
1 second. So Courtney says Nancy's already talking about looking for common ground. First of all, Nancy Pelosi is a fucking ninja. Okay, she knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
She knows exactly what to say and when to say it. Don't worry. Nancy Pelosi is gonna toe the line.
Yeah,
that's not one you.
I'm not worried about Nancy Pelosi doing that. What I am going to say is you're going to see her assume this mantle of the leader, the de facto leader of the Democratic Party, as the only Democrat that truly has any power in Washington at the moment. She will use that. She absolutely will, and she will get Democrats in line. And yes, there will be a couple stragglers, just like there were stragglers in the Republican Party when they're trying to pass stuff. She will get them in line if she's the next House Speaker. If she's not the next House Speaker, then, bravo, because we all love to see a little bit of change in blood. But it's going to be really nerve-wracking for 2 years with someone who's inexperienced at the job, running half of 1/3 of the federal government, when you've got Donald Trump and all these people coming after you for every little thing. I mean, if you don't put someone like Nancy Pelosi there who can resist impeachment, who can resist...
And I mean this in the best possible way. Nancy Pelosi is a stone cold... I'm not going to say it.
She's a G. But, I mean, we have to worry about that. We have to worry about Ruth Bader Ginsburg falling over every 5 minutes. I mean, there's so many...
You thought that was like a hit on her life.
I did. I honestly, when you wake up and you see that she just fell...
I mean, there's a lot of Republicans that thought Obama had this guy killed. Scalia. Yeah.
In his private ranch in Texas at some resort where it would have taken you 30 minutes to figure out where the nearest exit was. I mean, that's the life that these type of people live, especially the conservatives. Not that the liberals and progressives don't abuse and corrupt and stuff like that too, but that's where they found his body, basically on a lounge chair by a pool.
Speaking of bodies, the death toll in California is now up to 43.
And we're not talking about mass shootings. We're talking about fires.
Yes. There are people that had like a 15-minute warning to just get up and leave. Came back, everything's gone. And this is like indiscriminate. Like
the entire town
Gerard Butler's home gone. Miley Cyrus, Guillermo del Toro, Scott Derrickson. That's the guy who directed Doctor Strange. Gone. And there's a lot of people that died. They found their bodies just charred in cars because they were trying to find their way out and couldn't get out.
Fires moved so quickly,
and it's close to the coast.
Mm-hmm. So the wind is picking up. The Santa Ana winds are the worst thing.
And why did I bring this up? Because Trump was like, "Hey, this is a forest mismanagement, and you got to fix it now. I'm going to stop federal funds."
To look at people in the country that have just faced a natural disaster. We're talking, you can't blame, Florida for the hurricanes.
Yeah, but here's the thing: the jurisdiction that's supposed to help with this, it's not forest management. It would be the federal. There's like some federal department, so it's actually the federal government would have fucked up. And also, these things kind of just happen. It started from a campfire.
Well, honestly, listen, I mean, the last big fire, it cost $69 million because they were doing a baby reveal, and this is a place that has had no rain for months. I mean, it's dry. It's a desert, and it's got millions more people living in it than it should be able to sustain.
What I do want to read to you, however, is a tweet from the California Corrections Office, and I want you to listen to this. Hang on, let me find it. So, and this is not like fake news. This is a real tweet. So, let's see. Okay, today more than 2,000 volunteer inmates, volunteer inmate firefighters. Think about those three words.
No, I already.
More than 2,000 volunteer inmate firefighters, including 58 youth offenders, are battling wildfire flames throughout California. Inmate firefighters serve a vital role clearing thick brush down to bare soil to stop the fire spread.
This was something. There was a huge issue.
The actual F
You remember
58 youth offenders? Those are juveniles.
Mhm.
Underage kids that they have fighting fires.
Do you
and how could
remember
you
the
be
picture?
a volunteer inmate?
Do you remember the picture of the people playing golf while that hill of trees burned behind them? The last big fires
Sounds
in
familiar.
wine country around Temecula a couple months ago in California, where these people were just continuing to play golf despite the fact the entire countryside behind them was on fire. Those fires and the ones that have happened for decades now have been fought by inmate labor, and these same inmates, when they get out, are not permitted to work as fire department officials. They're not permitted to join volunteer fire departments. They're not permitted to be in any part of public safety because of stupid federal rules regarding felony convictions.
Calling them volunteers is like
But
calling the slaves that were brought over here indentured servants.
No, they are volunteers only to the aspect that they did go around asking who wants to come out of jail today and go fight fires. And they are probably rewarded in some way, maybe an extra juice cup, maybe they get some special treatment of whatnot. They are volunteers to that respect, and that is something that I would like to make sure that there's clarified. They're not just rounding up all the inmates and saying we're throwing you into the flames. You're a human shield.
Aren't they?
Yeah, but I think that it is important to bring that up because the way that inmates are treated
As slaves.
as virtually as slaves, as indentured servants, it's
slaves.
a horrible situation because if they do stuff like that, then there's got to be some kind of reward because the whole point of paying back your debt to society is literally do something for society. And what is more
It's like the Suicide Squad.
What is more of a payback of debt than literally protecting the lives and property and the actual
It's a good thing they let you vote after that.
Well,
some places.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine what's going to happen afterwards. And maybe because of this, people will try and get a ballot measure in California since that's how they do it.
Why would they tweet that? It just they said it like with a badge of honor.
I mean,
like,
I could see how they could possibly see that as a badge, but you know what? Maybe if the federal government wasn't cutting money from wildlife funding and from the forest management preserves and everything like that in the national park system, maybe there would have been more eyes on these campfires and stuff, or somebody to patrol and say, hey, maybe don't start that campfire. You know, maybe there would have been some way to prevent it, but the fact is that California's been on fire for like 100 years, and Florida and the Gulf Coast has been underwater for like 100 years, and will continue to be that way, and it's only going to get worse. And by saying that it's just mismanagement,
two places I'm never
where thousands of people are going to die, and you're not going to offer words of condolence, you're not going to say we're going to do everything we can, we'll send in the net, whatever we need. You're going to say, oh, bad forest management, because you're never going to win California's electoral votes. You don't have to care about the population.
Speaking of not caring, and we don't have to get back into the midterms, but I was really looking at America and looking at what the issues were around the midterms. How is the main issue not the thousands of people that died because of neglect in Puerto Rico? And they just lied about it, and they're cutting funding going to Puerto Rico. How was taking children away from their parents at the border not the number one thing in the election? It's
maybe not nationally, but I think if you look at the map after the midterms, you'll see that a lot of Democratic pickups in places like Texas and these red belt states were in places where the immigrant population really did not like the conversation being about them and the negativity about them. 57% of people who voted on Tuesday had said that the main concern that they had was healthcare, which is, it's true. I mean, the past 2 years, Donald Trump and his people have taken every step possible to gut the ACA and to make insurance so prohibitively expensive.
But they
for regular
said
people.
that they're protecting pre-existing conditions.
They say a lot of things. Donald Trump said he wouldn't golf if he was president. Donald Trump threw Jim Acosta out citing that...
okay,
hold on,
let's talk about Jim Acosta.
Threw Jim Acosta out citing that he was being disrespectful to the president in the White House, and if you're in the White House, a place that, and I'm quoting Trump, it's very sacred and very special to me. A place he called a dump a couple months ago, and a place where 8 years a president stood there being called an illegal alien and a Muslim and a non-citizen. The same president who says that you don't get to be there unless you respect the president in the White House revoked the hard pass of CNN's Jim Acosta with the Secret Service. They didn't even let him into the building. This is a absolute violation of, I believe it's 1977 Circuit Court case.
And CNN is suing.
And CNN is suing, but not before they offered an olive branch. They said, listen, we can work this out let's figure out what was wrong. We'll pull Jim down a little bit. But they refused. They said no, and as a matter of fact, we're actually going to come after more. And the point of this is that viewpoint discrimination is illegal. You cannot discriminate against the press because of the way they cover you. You can discriminate for security concerns. You can say nobody can come in, but you can't handpick the people that can walk into that room.
One other thing, though, and I don't think this is being stressed enough. The White House released a doctored video.
Yes, propagated by the press secretary of the United States.
Like, how?
My mind is blown because it's literally just the most blatant form of the exact thing that he's been saying. We're going to fight against fake news and all. And they put out a doctored video of trying to say that, to suggest that Jim Acosta put his hands on an intern who was trying to take the microphone away from him, which is completely not the case. And thankfully, there was enough information, other people there with the correct information, that it was easily able to be spotted. But this information still got around. It was tweeted out by the government, by the press secretary of the United States, and people believed this. Millions of people probably saw it before they even realized.
This comes back to the other point. How weren't certain things the number one issue, right? Like, if you don't see that we're moving more towards an authoritarian rule, like the building blocks are there. These things are in place. When you are just like blatantly assaulting the truth with stupid lies, like, you ever get the letter from the Nigerian prince, the email from the Nigerian prince?
We've all got it in the letter from the Nigerian prince.
So I was watching a documentary on that and how the people that actually were dumb enough to get caught by that, the way they get you is they tell the most absurd lies, and if you believe those, then they know, or they have greater confidence that you'll give them money, right? And they play on people's greed, right?
Well, now, if you watch the episode 10 of the Untold History of America, Oliver Stone's Netflix thing, which I watched right before coming here, he kind of goes into that. But I think we're not just going towards a more authoritarian. We are going down the exact same path
that Germany went down.
Every empire in the past 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6 centuries has gone through. The Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, the French, the Spanish, the Austro-Hungarian, the Japanese.
You do so well, and then
German,
you tear yourself apart from the inside.
The Roman Empire was really the one that started it all. You know, the Third Reich was basically a reimagining of the Roman Empire. That's why the eagle and the way they march and the salute. But the point is that America is now getting to that point where it's like, are we reaching that peak where everything is just going to be a downhill collapse of empire, or are we getting to that place where the republic is dead and we're about to go through 600 years of authoritarian dictators, emperors who will rule by decree, put soldiers where they want, take what they want, and be murdered left and right, and replaced left and right by people in power.
But this is the point that I'm trying to come to. All of this is just the testing ground. Basically, what I'm saying is Trump is a Nigerian prince, right? And
don't tell him that.
If his supporters believe him more than the truth, right? If the cost of entry for any position is absolute fealty, right? If he is trying to systematically disregard any check on his power, and people are allowing that because of 1, their gullibility, and 3, their greed, right? The greed or their hate and but I'm counting the fear and the greed all as one, right? So the greed is, if I am an evangelical and I want judges on the court, that's my greed. So I'll let you tell me anything. I'll let you lie to me because I think I'm going to get these
Matt
judges.
Whittaker, who thinks that nobody should be a judge unless they can prove they're Christian.
Right.
And now he's the acting attorney general.
So if your greed is you don't want Mexicans coming into the country, he says, yeah, I'm going to give you that. And so all of the things that you said you stood up for, and this is the most hilarious thing to me, or the most ironic thing, is when people say, I hate Hillary because she's a liar. So I voted for Trump. I hate Hillary because she's just using her power to get rich. So I voted for Trump. I hate Hillary and the Democrats because they they just want too much power, and they're trying to do top down rule, and they're in bed with the big businesses. But I voted for Trump, right? And none, or I hate the Democrats because they spend all this money and they're leaving my kids with all this debt. But I voted for Trump, and I'll do it again, right? Because it doesn't matter anymore. It doesn't matter what he says. Once you've made that bed, they could tell you, like, look, you're gonna have to sacrifice your first daughter. This is the team I'm on, so I'm riding out.
Well, you got 2 years now to see how he's going to respond to this.
Or maybe you don't.
Listen,
maybe you have 6 years.
Well, the Republicans going to build sandbags around their positions. Yes, absolutely, because they don't want another blue wave to come. 2 years from now, though, if you look at this midterm, highest turnout results in a midterm in God knows how long, 9-point lead, total votes for Democrats versus total votes for Republicans.
And somehow the Republicans still have the Senate.
And somehow they still have the Senate. I mean, that's the same thing in district cases where, 1.9 million people voted for Democrats in Virginia and they get 10 seats, and 1.4 million people voted for Republicans in Virginia and they have the other 40 seats. That's just how gerrymandering works. But what it comes down to for this 2016 to 2020 is that in 2016, Trump only won the Electoral College by the votes he did because he only won the certain states by several thousand votes. And if we're talking, even if this 9-point fervor after the midterms cut in half, 4.5 points in any direction would flip those states to a Democrat. I mean, Wisconsin could easily be flipped back, especially now that 2020 is going to come up with Democrats in control of the House and in governorships of most of these states that Trump won. I mean, we're talking about women, a woman governor in, I think, was it Missouri? Or no, Kansas. She beat Chris Kobach.
Sure.
But, I mean, we're talking about places that used to be the heart of the Republican Party, and now Kansas is solid blue. I mean, I never thought I would put those words in the same sentence. Kansas is blue. Their congresswoman is blue. The governor is blue. I mean, these are people that were upset by being typecasted and stereotyped as ignorant Southerners and rural hicks and all these kind of things, and they didn't want that perception. And they did kind of like the same thing you just said. It was like, well, I didn't want that perception, so I voted for a Democrat this time. We only ever are going to have two choices. And we've complained plenty of times when third-party people have siphoned votes off, but if it weren't for a third party, Bill Clinton wouldn't have won in 92. And George Bush would have had his second term, and Republicans wouldn't have felt like Democrats stole that from them. And, we wouldn't have probably ended up with the Bush years. It's just, it just going back and forth where one party thinks that they were robbed of their manifest destiny by the other party, and they do everything they can to undermine them and undercut them and prevent their progress while blaming those same people for the reason why there's no progress. And that's what we're going to see in 2020. You're going to see Donald Trump go after every Democrat and say that's the reason nothing's gotten done, because they took the House.
Well,
but the Senate Republicans will refuse to hear anything the Democrats from the House have to say.
Here's the other problem. If something happens in the economy in the next 2 years, Trump is just going to blame it on the Democrats.
Absolutely, and he'll have every impetus
Worse is if something bad happens in the economy after Trump is out of office. Right? Then they're going to say, even though it would be their policies that led to a crash, they'd be like, see, as soon as the Democrats took over,
I mean, how many people do you know still blame George Bush for the recession? No, they say Obama was president in 2009. He took office and everything had finally culminated, but he is still the one that is blamed for it. Now, granted, Barack Obama ran on a specific campaign of populism and stuff like that, and as soon as he took power, he went crawling to Wall Street for money and gave all these people bailouts. The Troubled Asset Relief Program, the TARP program, if you remember, was $700 billion. That was just given. We
just spent $1.2 billion given. 1.2 trillion, yes. $1.2 trillion. Right? But the point is, like, right now, the new budget is bigger than the TARP package, and nobody cares. Right? we have these huge deficits because they just gave the money away to corporations in the form of permanent tax cuts, and they were able to sell it by giving temporary tax cuts to working peoples, which will expire likely when a Democrat's in office.
Mm-hmm. I think they said 6 years, so
right
at the end of 2024.
So the point is, Obama did not actually, like, Bush is the one, forget about messing up the economy. Bush is the one who got the TARP money. Obama came into office and it was his job to dole that money out. And we can say whatever we want about let them fail. It's always very easy to Monday morning quarterback when the fate of the world is not on your shoulders, provided you give a fuck, right? If he let the auto industry go out of business, that would have spiraled around the whole world, and we would have went into a great depression.
I'm not disagreeing with that decision.
If he let effed up as it was, if he let the banks fail, and you went to your bank and you couldn't get your savings money out, what then? Right? So we can say
my only qualms was not a single person went to jail. Nobody was in trouble. Nobody was fined. There were no limits on the compensation that could go to these bankers. Barack Obama ran on the hope and change, on small dollar donations, on people, on young people, on betting on the future, and he carried through a lot of his promises. We delivered marriage equality. We got ACA.
Until Mitch McConnell was in power. And that was it.
And he would not have probably gotten even that far if he had not agreed to a lot of the things that these bankers and these Wall Street people wanted. If he had gone after their salaries, they probably would have said, well, screw it, we're going to let ourselves fail, and we're going to blame it on you, and I'm going to go to the Caymans. I get why Obama did what he did. The point is, though, that no matter who gets elected, there's going to be so many people around them that are going to change what they're saying and doing. And even Donald Trump, who likes to think that he's this most independent, unique figure, smartest, most brilliant guy that's ever been president, even he has all these people around him that are pushing this neocon, far right-wing, move to upset the entire world order because Dick Cheney wanted it that way 18 years ago. And that's where we end up.
I thought Putin wanted it that way.
Well, Putin,
that's
I think, as much as you want to talk about how bad Vladimir Putin is and how bad dictatorship is and, all the things that he's done to make the Russian world a little bit worse in relative to America, he has done a lot to rebuild his own country and make them relevant again.
Great again.
Relevant again.
Did you see Trump tweeted, "Make France great again"?
France has been around for... Never mind.
Okay, I don't even... So are we talking about this whole...
For 2 years of my life, I was convinced that we shouldn't like the French because it was like 2003. I was a teenager. We just went to war. We were just attacked. I had no idea.
I'm
kids
not a
obviously
huge
didn't know
fan
anything.
of Macron.
But...
Macron.
After those 2 years, once I realized that I was literally being fed propaganda and I was eating it, there's no reason to hate the French, and yet I was like, freedom fries this and all that. France never did nothing for nobody. They lose all their wars and blah, blah, blah. But, when you actually grow up and you study and you look at things, just like we should be fact-checking things that are said today, I didn't fact-check anything, but once you do, you realize you were lied to. The French have a very proud and noble history, and they're on their 5th or 6th republic now, and they started revolutions after revolutions, and if it wasn't for them,
and
America
they did a lot of colonizing.
They did quite a bit of colonizing.
And when you go to Paris, they pretend they can't speak English, but they can. So I'm just putting that out here. They're not very nice people.
Some would say. But the point is, though, that the propaganda that gets fed to us through the media, through the military-industrial complex and blah, 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 that is what we're always going to find. So whatever makes somebody a profit, they're going to support. That's why you've got these people that support Donald Trump in office, because they're getting something out of it, whether it's a judge or whether it's a new regulation on oil and coal.
Or whether it's some a daily racist thing.
Yeah, so he doesn't have to actually be good at his job as long as he's doing what they want and he thinks he's in charge. I mean, the guy doesn't care about doing anything. He just wants to go golf. He wants to eat his chicken
Donald
and Diet
Trump
Coke.
has surrounded himself with craven opportunists. But this is the problem.
And they're even more craven because these are the people that cannot surround themselves with anybody but someone like Donald Trump.
No, right. But this is what I'm saying. None of them are leaders in their own right. And it's sort of, well, I have to castrate myself when I'm in the presence of the Mad King.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And go ahead. prostrate yourself and bow down, but at least you're getting a judge. Like it's we always have to be weary of how willing people are to bend to power, right? And that's why when you have a personality like Trump in power, you will get these kind of people, because there's always somebody.
Oh, they'll work their way out of the woodwork, and they'll find you, and they'll be like, hey,
right,
I'm willing to kill
and
10,000 people. I'm willing to put children in prison.
And we should end on this unless you had another topic. Nope. But what you can never discount, or what this presidency has shown me, not that I didn't notice already, but this sort of solidifies it. Ethics are only a tool that they use, which means I care about the deficit when Democrats are spending money, right? I care about family values when the other side is in office. I care about religious freedom. Well, the point is, they never really cared about these things, right? It's a thing that they used, a tool that they used. But when you can sit by idle and make excuses for the things that you used to be up in arms about, that tells me you never really cared about those things, right? Which means you were never even standing for something. Because at one point I thought, they're assholes because they just like believe in this shit. They don't believe in anything.
Well, and I suppose that's the whole point of belief, is that you're supposed to follow it without any supporting evidence. I mean, it's the whole reason in 2003 we invaded Iraq. We had no real, we lied right through our teeth, pulling power right at the UN, saying, look, Saddam Hussein's troops are on the border of Saudi Arabia, they're coming to get you. And the Saudi Arabians are like, oh no. They weren't nowhere near. And that's how we got 30,000 troops in Saudi Arabia. And that's what Osama bin Laden was like, why are there 30,000 troops in Saudi Arabia? You guys said, like, we were done. We're just kicking them out of Kuwait. Why are you still here? And then we didn't leave. Went to Baghdad. Saddam Hussein's like, oh, shit, I'm dead. And Al-Qaeda's in charge. All because we had to lie to get something done so that some guy could make a couple bucks on oil.
When's the last time you heard about ISIS?
Well, ISIS.
That's a story for another day. Whatever.
Story. But I suppose there's plenty of people who would say, oh, look, well, you haven't heard about ISIS. I guess Trump beat them all. He destroyed ISIS.
This is the one. Okay, one last thing. Scary
Same people
thing.
that will not give credit to Obama for killing bin Laden.
Scary thing is that a report came out that the North Koreans are still building their nuclear...
Oh, they're building ballistic missiles.
Right. So they're building ballistic missiles. Because Trump doesn't want this to look like a loss, he's just telling people it's not happening.
Well, they'll believe him.
But how scary is that? Like, is he going to say it's not happening until they, like, fire a bomb somewhere?
So he's saying that the missiles have stopped. They've stopped firing missiles. Stopped doing okay. So yes, they've stopped test firing missiles over Japan and South Korea. That's a good start. But they have not dismantled anything of value. They've blown up test sites that they were about to dismantle anyway, or that they just built up enough so that they could dismantle it in front of people. But the missile sites and things like that, they're still active. Satellites still show them that they're building and bringing material and stuff. And there's no reason North Korea will negotiate on it, because they say it's not there. So if they say it's not there, Trump can't say, well, we have to negotiate those away, because they're not acknowledging they exist. And they don't care. So if you're going to show Kim Jong-un a picture of a satellite with, we've got all these over here, we know what's happening. I don't care. We're not going to invade North Korea.
I'm just saying it's
Donald Trump has yet to visit a single battlefield, and he had to cancel a Remembrance Day for some rain. So try to remember that is your commander-in-chief. That's your tough guy in charge that wants to lay fire and fury on everybody. He's only scary because he can put his finger on a button, and his finger weighs enough to press the button.
The world has sort of training wheels on now, right? But what if something really happens? This is the problem when you just completely get rid of truth. Like that aside from everything else, that's very worrying that you're hearing a report that they are developing ballistic missiles, and because it would make him look bad, even though it really wouldn't make him look bad, then he has to deny it. And this could cause lives. But again, Puerto Rico, kids at the border.
I'm sure by 2020,
birthright citizenship.
2024, you're going to see a lot of people attributing terrible things to Donald Trump that he tried to avoid being the biggest issues now. And he's done a good job at distracting a lot of people, but it can only last for so long. Because we know
or it could last forever.
Think about all the vicious dictators and kings that have ever lived.
And the right to succession would go to Don Jr.
But the thing is that history still knows the atrocities these people committed. He will not escape. He might escape it right now and for being talked about in the present.
History is told by the victors.
That's not true anymore.
If lions were historians, hunters would cease to be heroes. I think that's a good note to end on.
It might be a good note to end on, but in the age we live in today, victory does not automatically give you authorship of the story.
Think so?
Donald Trump won the presidency, but we're still talking about Hillary Clinton. Years later, that's all they are. What is she gonna do?
Fantastic, but he's still president.
Yeah. All right. That's the show.
Where can they find you?
Happy midterms. There's words on the
they can
bottom
find
of the
me.
screen.
Go to me first.
Go to me first.
Okay. Whoever.
I was copying him, so.
Okay. Okay. Hey, you can find me on your favorite social media network as long as it's not Snapchat at Steve A.M. Johnson. And on Mondays, you can find me on The Real, where we keep you up to date in all the latest of the world of TV and movies. And we're working on a new show for Sundays, and we may go back to Walking Dead, but Rick's gone, so who cares?
Thanks for spoiling that for everybody.
Where can they find you?
Rest in peace, Stan Lee. They can find me with the words on the bottom of the screen. If you pick up a Where's Waldo or a Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, I do a couple of cameos, and you may also search for me there, possibly in St. Louis rolling on dubs. In any case, we sincerely appreciate you finding us here on the Second Page podcast, where you can also find rebroadcasts, as well as checking out YouTube. Subscribe and like to us on that, and you can see all the things we've done. Remember, this is episode 46, so we've been doing a lot of work here. Just remember, your vote is important. The last election proved that. Democracy is important. People like Jamal Khashoggi and other reporters around the world who are suffering prove that freedom of the press, though I will not say that Steve or I are as in much of danger as some of these people, but this is freedom of the press, and this is very important to America. So thank you for watching. If you're broadcasting, please comment.
Stop. Hold on.
Breaking news?
Yeah, breaking news. Go to patreon.com/r2network, because this shit ain't free.
Spell that for everybody?
Help us out. What?
Patreon.
Patreon? P-A-T...
R-E-O-N.
No. That's patron, but Patreon.
R-E-O-N.
Yes.
Patreon.
Yes.
Like Eon at the end of Patron.
Yes, exactly.
Just add an E to Patron and you're good. Yeah, Patreon, please go and donate and give us a little bit of money so that we can make funner stuff.
Right, we're gonna make tiers, and you can help us keep the lights on.
We'd like to fill up those other two squares on your screen with fun stuff. So thanks again for watching. We appreciate it. We'll see you next week around the same time, Tuesday, of course. And hugs, not drugs.
Hugs, not drugs.
Sometimes drugs are okay.
And Excelsior.
Especially in Michigan. I want to go to Michigan to smoke some pot.